It was a calm morning at Los Angeles International Airport. Flight 772 of the First Sky Airline, bound for New York, was fully booked, but as always, first-class passengers enjoyed privileged treatment. While some sipped coffee or skimmed through newspapers in the VIP lounge, a well-known real estate businessman, Richard Bentley, marched briskly toward the boarding gate, his phone glued to his ear. "I want the numbers before noon, or you can forget about the deal," he barked at his interlocutor before abruptly hanging up. Richard had a busy schedule, and he believed the world owed him. It was a mentality he carried with pride. When he boarded the plane, Richard quickly scanned the first-class cabin. Blue leather seats, elegant passengers, and elite service. Exactly what he expected as his right. But his eyes immediately locked onto an older man sitting in the seat he believed was his. The man wore a worn leather jacket, a plaid shirt, and held a cup of coffee he seemed to be savoring peacefully, as if he belonged there. To Richard, this scene was an affront. How could a man who looked so ordinary occupy a seat in first class? He approached briskly, attaché case in hand, and without waiting for the man's reaction, declared, "Excuse me, sir, but you're in my seat. You should check your ticket." The older man looked up, surprised but calm. "Oh, really? Perhaps there's been a mix-up. Let me check," he replied in a soft voice. Richard rolled his eyes, exasperated. "There's no mix-up. This is my seat. I didn't pay thousands of dollars to argue over a chair. So move, please." The older man remained composed and pulled out his ticket to show Richard. But before he could respond, a flight attendant arrived to defuse the situation. "Gentlemen, may I assist you?" she asked. Still defensive, Richard quickly explained, "Yes, you can. This man is sitting in my seat. Can you ask him to move? I'm tired and don't have time for this." The attendant took both men's tickets and examined them carefully. After a moment, she turned to Richard, her professional smile unwavering. "Mr. Bentley, your seat is actually 4B, just behind this one. This gentleman is indeed in the correct seat." An awkward silence fell. Richard stared at his ticket in disbelief before realizing he had made a mistake. But instead of apologizing, he muttered something unintelligible and moved to his seat without another word. As he settled in, however, he couldn't resist a parting remark. They really should screen first-class passengers better. Several nearby passengers overheard the exchange and looked at Richard with disapproval. But the older man seemed unbothered. He calmly resumed sipping his coffee and gazing out of the window as if nothing had happened. The flight took off and everything seemed to return to normal. Richard opened his laptop and immersed himself in his emails, trying to forget the incident. But about an hour into the flight, the atmosphere in the cabin changed. A murmur began to circulate among the passengers. "Is it really him? Do you think it's Clint Eastwood?" Richard frowned at the name but was too focused on his work to pay attention. The whispers continued, though, and a flight attendant discreetly approached the older man to speak with him. Moments later, she walked away beaming, visibly honored. Richard glanced at the man out of the corner of his eye, analyzing him once more. That calm demeanor, that understated presence. Could it be? As he searched for answers on his phone, the captain made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor of having a true cinema legend on board today. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Clint Eastwood, renowned actor and director." The cabin erupted in applause. Passengers turned to Clint Eastwood, some awestruck, others discreetly snapping photos. Richard felt his heart stop. Clint Eastwood? That man I insulted earlier is Clint Eastwood, he thought, stunned. Shame washed over him like a wave. He replayed his rude behavior and thoughtless remarks in his mind. How could he have been so foolish? Clint Eastwood, meanwhile, smiled politely and greeted passengers who thanked him for his films. A little girl approached timidly to ask for an autograph, which he graciously signed. Richard, unable to stay seated any longer, slowly walked over to Clint Eastwood. He felt all eyes on him, but he had no choice. "Mr. Eastwood," he began, his voice trembling, I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. I didn't realize it was you. Clint looked at him calmly, his piercing yet gentle eyes unwavering. After a moment, he replied, "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect, young man." The words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. He nodded silently, unable to respond, and returned to his seat under the amused gazes of some passengers. The rest of the flight was torture for Richard, who didn't dare lift his eyes. He listened as passengers chatted with Clint Eastwood, sharing anecdotes and praise, while he sat steeped in his humiliation. Upon landing, Richard left the plane as quickly as possible, hoping never to cross paths with Clint Eastwood or any of the passengers on that flight again. As for Clint, he exited the plane with his dignity intact and a faint smile, leaving behind a lesson no one aboard would soon forget. Conclusion: this simple encounter in the skies reminded everyone of an essential truth. Respect isn't based on someone's appearance or status, but on the humanity with which we treat others. For Richard, this lesson would stay with him forever.